Hello, thank you for stopping by. My name is Becky and this is BecxReadz, and today I'm going to share with you some fall book recommendations. I know this video concept has already come and gone. So many people I've subscribed to have already put these out, but it's still fall and I'm just now getting around to doing it. But you can still read these this fall. My first fall book recommendation is an adult horror, and that is The Resurrectionist by E.B. Hudspeth. This is a very unique and strange book. It's not very long. It is split up into two sections. The first section is the fictionalized biography of a Dr. Spencer Black, who is fascinated with the anomalies of the body, extra limbs, growths, things like that. And he comes up with this hypothesis that the abnormalities, good God, that's hard for me to say, aren't really abnormal. They are what the body is supposed to be. He thinks that these abnormalities are what we evolved from. So if people have extra limbs or such, it's because we evolved from mermaids, harpies, etc. So the medical community that he's a part of, they all start to distance himself from him because they think he's going bananas. And he does. He ends up going crazy in his search to try and construct what he thinks the human body once was. And it leads down some very dark paths. It leads to questions that you will still have when you're done reading this book about what the fuck happened. But the latter half of this book is actually his codex, his fictional book that he wrote that depicts what he thinks the bodies of humans evolved from. So you get all these illustrations of like the mythical creatures and their bone structures and their muscle structures and how he thinks it evolved. Was rather spooky, and it did leave me questioning a lot of things, but I thoroughly enjoyed it, and I think if you're into the weird, you might enjoy this as well. My next recommendation for fall is a gothic dark paranormal romance, and that is Nightshade by Carrie Lake. This is about our main character, Farron, who is searching for her father's soul in purgatory, or Nightshade as it is called. And when she's traveling through Nightshade, she ends up meeting this man named Jericho, who is a sentinel. He is a half demon, half angel. And she feels this strong, intense connection to him, but she doesn't know why. And Jericho feels that same pull toward Farron, and he knows that there's something special about her, but he can't remember what it is. There is something in his brain that is blocking him from remembering who she is and the part that she plays in his life. This book deals with a reincarnation love between Farron and Jericho. It deals with a religious cult, religious abuse, very religious undertones in this book. It also deals with demons and angels and what Jericho is willing to do to keep Farron in his life now that he's found her again. It's a duology, so both books are over 600 pages, but once I started reading this, I couldn't put it down. So if you are into gothic, dark, paranormal romances, definitely put this on your TBR. Next up, I have a contemporary romance, and I'm recommending it because it deals with going back to school. And in fall, that's typically when people go back to school. And that is The Dean's List by Kelly Collins. So this is about River, who is a broke grad student. She's trying to figure out how she can afford to go back to college and finish out her degree, when one of her friends recommends that she become part of the Dean's List, which isn't what it sounds. It is a secret organization that pimps out college students, willing college students, and matches them up with people in their matching fields of study so they can do whatever their mentor sort of wants them to do, whether that be sexual or just companionship, and in return they will get a heads up in that area of study. So she takes this opportunity and she becomes a high-class escort. And one day she meets this man named Jonathan, who is a very wealthy man. He doesn't really want any sort of romance. He's just there for companionship and sex, of course. But they end up realizing that they have a lot in common, but he's much older than her and he really doesn't want anything to do with romance. I loved this story because River is one of the smartest female characters I have ever read. She really takes the time to think through her thought processes and how her decisions are going to impact her future. And when I did my reread of my top 50 books to see what books were my top 10 of the decade, this made the list. So I highly recommend this one. My next fall recommendation is Orphea by Joanna Harris. This is an adult fantasy, sort of fairy tale-esque story. It is a bit of a take on the Orpheus myth if you're familiar with that. But in this, we are following Faye, who lost her daughter. She's very distraught about it. She uses running as a mean to cope with her grief, life, and one night she is out running in the streets of London when she spots her daughter through this glowing crack in the sidewalk. So this sets her out on this journey and this realization that there is a completely other world separate from what she thinks there is. And she has to travel through this other London, this other world, to try and track down the Halloween King to make a deal to get her daughter back. And it's a journey trope of what a mother is willing to sacrifice for her daughter, the memories that she loses, and the memories that she keeps along the way. It was a really unique and atmospheric story. I really didn't know that this had anything to do with like the afterlife or Halloween until I read this in here. Halloween doesn't play much of a role in this other than he's called the Halloween King, but it did give me fall vibes. So if you're looking for something unique and short and quick, definitely check this out. On to the young adult books that I recommend. First up is going to be Anatomy, a Love Story by Dana Schwartz. This is a young adult gothic historical about Hazel, who is a young woman in the 1800s in Edinburgh. She wants to become a physician, but she's a young woman and she doesn't have a lot of opportunities to do that. So she disguises herself as a boy and she sneaks into this anatomy class. But when she is discovered by her professor, he kicks her out. He tells her if she can manage to pass an anatomy exam without actually coming to his class, then she can get her physician's certificate. So she implores the help of Jack, who is a grave robber, to bring her bodies to do her anatomy lessons on. And through this, they develop a relationship and they discover that there is some sinister, somewhat paranormal secrets going on in Edinburgh. So the title of this book, A Love Story, is quite deceiving because the romance is very light and it doesn't take place until about the last third of the book. There's not really a whole lot of romance or love in this book, so I don't know why it's called a love story. But this book thoroughly engrossed me. I love the Edinburgh setting. I'm not one for dark academia, but I really enjoyed this book. I loved the gothic vibes. I loved the morbidity of it. And it's a book that got 6 stars for me. So if any of that intrigues you, check this out. My next recommendation is one of my favorite cozy dark fantasies. That sounds weird to say, cozy dark fantasy. But it is, and it's also a young adult, and that is A Daughter of the Trolls by Mackenzie Catron. One of the reasons this is a favorite of mine is because it features a main character who uses a wheelchair, and she stays in her wheelchair. No magic fixes her disability in this book, and I loved seeing that represented. So in this, we were following 18-year-old Sparrow, who, like I said, she uses a wheelchair. She and her mother protect this magical glen with these magical creatures from this evil witch called Black Annis. And one day, through a mistake that Sparrow makes, Black Annis invades their glen and she slaughters a lot of the creatures that are there, and she ends up taking several people, including Sparrow's family, hostage back to her cave to use as playthings. So Sparrow and her childhood friend Rush have to set out on this journey through this very atmospheric, magical woods to try and rescue their loved ones. But this forest is not made for a wheelchair, so Sparrow really has to depend on Rush's help and depend on the magic that is in this forest to help her save her loved ones. Now, I honestly can't remember if this actually takes place in the fall, but just the dark, gothic, magical, whimsical woods gave it a fall feeling to me. And this book alone just looks like a fall-esque book. So if you are looking for another really short book, it's got great disability representation in it because the author herself uses a wheelchair, and it's just so whimsical and magical and, I don't know, sweet and wholesome and touching, but it does have those darker vibes that remind you of a classic fairy tale. I implore you so much to check out this book. My next recommendation is The Bone Houses by Emily Lloyd-Jones. Look at this cover, it just says fall. This is about Rin, who is a gravedigger, and she is protecting her small village from the undead that live in the forest that surrounds her village. She's doing a great job of this until Ellis comes along. He is a map maker, and for some reason when he shows up, the undead start attacking her village with a vengeance. So Ellis and Rin have to set out on this journey to find a magical way to get rid of the undead and break this curse. So I loved this because it had a journey trope. I loved the character dynamics in this. It had a little bit of romance, but not too much. Again, it had this dark forest that they have to traverse, which just gave those fall vibes. It's got zombies in it as well. So if that sounds like a romping good time to you, I highly recommend you give this a go. My next recommendation is a younger YA series, and that is The House of Dark Shadows by Robert Lopariolo. This is book 1 in his Dream House King series. This is about the King family who moves to this small town, to this very mysterious house in the woods. This house has doors that lead nowhere. It's got doors that when you enter it, you come out somewhere completely different. It's got strange noises and things like that. But what these two young brothers don't realize is that this house is actually where their mother disappeared from. Their father has been keeping that a secret as he tries to figure out how he can get his wife back. This was a really adventurous and kind of spooky young YA series. I absolutely loved it. I got into it. I've reread this book, as you can see, based on the spine creases many a time. And my last fall recommendation is a middle grade series, and that is the Seraphina series by Robert Beatty. I took the dust jacket off because I like these naked hardcovers. This is a historical middle grade series about Seraphina, who lives in the basement of the Biltmore estate with her father, and nobody knows that she's there. She designates herself as the Biltmore estate's rat catcher. And one day when some guests show up at the Biltmore estate for an event, some strange things start happening. People start going missing, animals start behaving weirdly, so Seraphina has to come out of the darkness. She has to make friends, and together they are trying to uncover the secrets of what's going on at the Biltmore estate. And that leads Seraphina to discovering some secrets about where she comes from. This is definitely a spookier middle grade series. I loved the historical vibes of it because the Biltmore estate is a real place, which I've been to, which is the reason I loved this so much, is I could sit there and think, I've traveled down that path. And I feel like this is a middle grade series that anyone could really enjoy, no matter your age range. Those are some recommendations that I have for you for the fall spooky season. Let me know down in the comments, have you read any of these, or let me know what your favorite fall recommendation is. And if you've made it this far in the video and don't want to comment any of that, but want to let me know that you made it this far, could you leave me a leaf emoji, please? And until my next video, thank you so much for watching, and go read something fall and spooky. Bye!